welcome to QTV, and you are watching The Week in Review, our weekly trawl through some of the big stories of the week just gone by. And here to go through the stories with me, as usual, I have friend and colleague Mamadou Mbodj. Mr. Mbodj, as ever, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Ade.
And we also have Lamindi Sonko doing the signing. And of course, welcome to the program to you, the viewers, of course. So what's on the menu today? Well, of course, one of the big stories is the trade-off, the kind of standoff, rather, at the border, mainly to do with trade between Gambia and Senegal. Has it been resolved? Perhaps we'll find out. And some ECOWAS folks are here to see what's happened with the money that they gave to the Gambia to distribute to flood victims, 2022 flood, I believe it was. And also, speaking of floods, some people are not having anything approaching floods, and they're farmers in Sami, in Central River region, a whole month without rain in this rain season. Also, the Gambia Tourist Board, GT Board. We've been hearing for the longest time that we should be doing more of the kind of internal tourism, you know, visiting domestic tourism. Well, they're launching a campaign, and they've called upon some social media influencers, whatever that is, to help with it. And next door in Senegal, the newspapers decided to have a kind of blackout Tuesday. They didn't print because they were not happy with some government measures. These 5 of the stories on tonight's program. So let's get kicking, shall we? First one, we have to start with the recent cross-border standoff between the Gambia and Senegal. We've heard it before, we'll probably hear it again, but here's what happened this time. Have a look, have a listen.
The list of goods that have been exempted from tracking will be shared by the GRA with their Senegalese counterparts. It should be noted, however, that vehicles can be stopped and be checked for security reasons, and also truckers found breaking laws will be subjected to the full force of the law.
Along with these resolutions, he reveals that Senegal has also agreed that Gambian trucks in transit to Guinea-Bissau, Mali and Guinea-Conakry using the Senegalese corridor will only be charged for escort fees and nothing else. In addition, Senegal has also agreed to increase the period for the laissez-passer for Gambian vehicles entering Senegal from 10 days to 30 days at a cost of 5,000 CFA, with allowance for renewal for 15 days for 10,000 CFA.
Well, I said we've been here before, and we'll probably be here again, Mr. Mbodj. This time it was mainly to do with trade standoff, sort of to do with tracking of vehicles. Our Senegalese brothers and sisters were not happy that vehicles were going to be tracked, but then they used the opportunity to bring up a whole raft of things that have been kind of problematic between the two. But what's your sense of, I said, has it been resolved, and if so, for how long? What sense do you get on this latest contretemps?
Absolutely. This time, yeah, absolutely. There's an agreement there, which they will implement, and things will move on. I think they had, 300 trucks at the border, so they will allow them to move. So this is we're just applying our laws, aren't we? We want to use digitalize things now more, much better.
And collect some revenue.
That's it, by applying our own laws. We truckers in Senegal say, nope, we're having none of that.
having no truck with it.
That's it. No truck with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but I keep on wondering, we've got the Senegambia Secretariat. One would have thought that perhaps with something like this, you negotiate first, isn't it? You discuss. It's a sovereign right to do whatever, granted, but look at what it has cost. You're dealing with another country and giving the relationship, and we've got this institution called Senegambia Secretariat. Discuss things, come to an agreement, then it's easier, isn't it, to implement, because you need both parties really for these things to work. One would have thought that. I do not know.
When we discussed it on this morning, it was a similar point that I raised, because I felt that, okay, yes, we seem to have told our Gambian truck drivers what needs to be done and what will be done. But it seems the other people who are the Senegalese, it seemed to have taken them by surprise. And that's why they were objected to it. There'd been no kind of sensitization. There'd been no kind of formal, campaign to say to them, go on national radio, TV in Senegal and say, this is what you... And then, of course, everybody would have expected it and say, okay, this is what... But they seem to have been caught off guard, and that was one of the reasons why they objected.
That's exactly it. This is my point. So you need some kind of diplomatic delicacy in dealing with these things. I'm sure some officials were banging on about our sovereign right to do A, B, C, and D granted within, but here you're trading, dealing with another party, so that other party will have something to say about that. And given our relationship, for me, this is really the key. How do you introduce policy affecting both? You know, we can use the Secretariat in that sense, isn't it? Thrash out, iron out some of the sticking points, as it were, then it makes it easier. Anything that affects the border or trade between us, there should be that. And likewise, from Senegal's side, you change things, then you approach us in a way, you know, you need them to be diplomatically savvy.
I think that's a very good point, because we sent, you know, as our colleague Ibrahim Balde said, I should say, a high-powered delegation. And they decided not just to tackle the sticking point this time. They thought, okay, why not use this opportunity to tackle some others? And so we heard about the laissez-passer and all these others that were dealt with as a result, including from 15 days to 30 days extension and so on. And in that sense, it seems to be a good thing. But of course, you know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We'll see in a month or two's time whether this agreement holds and whether people on both sides of our porous border stick to it.
Absolutely. You'd know that another issue will come up sooner or later. It's just the nature of people, as it were. I'm living and trading together. The important thing for me is that the dispute resolution mechanism in place. That is the important bit. And then both parties trust it and respect it, its decisions. Once you have that in place, then, you know, you will be able to absorb the hiccups.
Well, that's right, because it seems as if, I'd agree. And it seems as if diplomacy won the day, because our colleague Don Williams said, you know, when he got there, you know, things were quite heated and it looked as if they might spiral out of control. And that's why, you know, they sent such a, you know, high-powered delegation there, that, you know, the seriousness of the situation that seemed to be developing. But, you know, touch wood, it seems as if there has been a resolution, and as I said, temporarily or otherwise, time will tell, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, sort of, I never treated it with any kind of crisis, you know, when these things
people were using the word crisis.
People were using such terms
as
crisis, but it isn't like that at all. And then we begin to say stuff like, oh, you know, this Senegalese, you know, stuff like that, you know, stereotypes. No, forget it. What do we say about the tongue and the teeth? Once in a while, this is bound to happen. So one must have a sense of reality, you know what I mean? This is how things happen. The issue is, how do you resolve them? You can never stop them popping up here and there. It is impossible. This is like human relationship. The trick is really to have a mechanism in place that will deal with these things peacefully.
Thank you for that. And so, Secretariat, we hope you're listening and watching, because we might be contacting you to find out why you weren't involved this time. But thank you, Mr. Mboj. Now, on to story number 2. A delegation from ECOWAS is currently in the Gambia, and they're here to assess the money that was given to the Gambia to help flood victims. They want to know, where's it gone, how's it been spent, and how's it been accounted for. What have they found out? Let them tell you. Have a look, have a listen.
In CRS, we have a system called the monitoring, evaluation, learning, and accountability. So we do nothing without the participatory approach, and we are very grateful that ECOWAS has provided a comprehensive report or feedback through the communities that they have engaged with, and it's a learning process to improve and of course to adjust to the needs of the people that we serve.
2021 alone, government spent $41 million to support the victims. And 2022, CRS, World Food Program, Caritas, and other partners also support. So this support that we are actually implementing now is an external support from ECOWAS.
And so we heard about some of the partners. The first speaker there was from CRS, Catholic Relief Services, and he talked about their own mechanism for kind of monitoring the aid that went through them. and ECOWAS had looked at that and gave some positive feedback, we are told. But generally, from the ECOWAS delegation, I should have played their clip as well. They seemed quite pleased with what they saw and what they found on the ground, as it were.
Absolutely. Even though I'll have to bear in mind that it's a political body. That's that diplomatic language. That's really what they're going to use. I understand that we were given $1.76 million.
That's correct.
The thing is, has all of that been accounted for?
Yes,
that is really the
we're waiting
important.
for the report.
We're waiting for the report.
That's right.
I understand that this is for the victims of the 2022 flood.
That's correct.
Apparently 50,000 people,
yes,
according to the head of NDMA, affected.
Well, about 2,600 households.
Households, that's it.
Then
people.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
And then apparently they they prioritized.
That's right. Yes.
And the women-headed households and those whose homes were completely destroyed. And that
so there was a kind of tier system.
Yeah, they had a tier system they had. So this is it. Now, it would be interesting to get the reports really and to see whether everything was spent. Because, I say that because we've already got an example here. Was it the National Audit Office with the COVID funds?
That's right.
They were not happy.
That's right.
There were many gaps that really were revealed. If that is the case, this one could also have gone the same way. Could have happened.
Because what they've done this time, they've been here for a few days and they've been taken to meet some of the beneficiaries and they've been able to speak to them to say, okay, tell us, show us what was your situation that needed this kind of assistance and how have you spent it and how have you dealt with it. And interestingly, in one of the speakers was talking about, I think 60% went on food items, of the money that were given to most of them. They spent about at least 60% on food, which is very interesting. But the trick this time is that they've gone and they visited various communities that were affected to see not just the damage for themselves, but also because they haven't just given them a report and then they've gone through the report. They've gone to actual sites that were affected by during the flood.
Absolutely, that's a very good thing. That's part of it. Part of the monitoring. You need to get that. But you also need to get the books.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Where's the money gone?
Where's the money gone? And all of it. We need to look at the books. We know what they are like.
Well, this is it, because there's always a temptation when huge sums of money come in that some of it gets diverted away from its intended. We had too many of these, and really it would be tragic if that happened in this case, where people have been greatly in need, and this money has been provided, and then some of it has been siphoned on. That would be a disgrace. So, as I said, we await the report to see whether they're satisfied, because, as you said, at a press conference, they're not going to reveal everything. So they'll use all the diplomatic niceties and diplomatic language to say, yes, what we've seen, we've been impressed with, and so on. And then the report, written report, will be the real one that we will all be poring over and going through with a fine-tooth comb.
And that's been a problem, this what they call the parallel state.
Yeah.
State officials officially apparently doing one thing, but behind the scenes something else is going on. It's all over the continent. This is not really a Gambian problem. It's all over the continent. It's just that you have few leaders who have shown that they were prepared to tackle this parallel state and destroy it. Otherwise, nothing will come to really any fruition. Let's be clear. You can come up with all the policies and all the money and the like, but these organizational leakages, everything will just be leaked. You wouldn't see the outcomes that you want. So this is something that any government would prioritize, knowing that that's actually the crux of the matter. You have to destroy that. Otherwise, that will eat into. It's a canker. It's like a canker, isn't it? It's into the state proper. That is really what the issue is. And we report after report. Nobody's making these things up. Let's go to the National Audit Report. We've seen how institutions have been behaving, even the Select Committee, in the National Assembly. You've seen how all of these organizations, the behavior, the lapses in finance, especially when it comes to finance.
Especially when it comes to finance.
We've been listening to the public officials.
That's right, in the local
government
commission.
You've seen all of of this.
Sure.
This is really the canker eating into the state.
Sure.
How do you break that? I
How do
think
you
that's
break it?
really an issue. Otherwise, a lot of things will not go right, Eddie.
Yeah, this is it. And we hope that there's no horror tales from the report when it comes. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Story number 3. Instead of floods, the opposite, one might say. We're in the rain season, and yet in Sami, in Central River region, farmers have been complaining that for a whole month they have had no rainfall. I'm not making this up. Hear it from the horse's mouth. Have a look, have a listen.
Every year, farmers look forward to the rainy season, given the importance of rainfall for their crops. However, for the farmers of Sami, it is over a month and some days since it last rained, which is seriously affecting crops and grazing animals. The crops are dying because of the extreme heat, and the grassland in the bush are dying up, leaving farmers in despair. Cherno Mbake, a farmer and resident of Lamenkoto Badala, assessed this year's rainy season a failure so far because of the drought, and as only a few farmers have completed sowing their seed. He says the rest of them are still waiting for the rains. It's almost mid-August, and unusually for this time of the year, sowing is incomplete. Mr. Mbake adds that farmers will still sow their seeds because they need the hay to feed their animals in the dry season, despite not being hopeful of a good harvest. He calls on the government and others to help.
He's calling on the government. We hear this all the time. I'm not sure whether he's calling them to bring rain or provide water. But on the more serious note, we keep hearing about various practices that we've indulged in and undertaken over the years, and now we're reaping the whirlwind. Instead of regular rainfall, somebody who was also in that story had been farming for 20 years and could not remember a time when by mid-August there'd been no rain, and certainly not for a month, and yet that's the situation. Climate change, whatever, who knows, but that's what they're facing.
Yes, that's one. Climate change is one, and the other is our vulnerabilities, the infrastructure. We are rain dependent. We've always known that you're rain dependent.
Sure.
And now with climate change, it will affect all sorts of patterns and the like.
Indeed.
But we are not prepared. We are not adapted to this
We don't do any
world.
rainfall harvesting,
We don't do that.
which we should do. Because when we get the torrential rain that even, unfortunately can lead to floods, even then, that rainfall is not harvested and said, okay, for when there's no rain, we can tap into this. But, he's saying the government, but it's not always the government that can solve these problems.
There's really no water management.
Yeah,
as it were. I was reading one report the other day, they're talking about the paucity, as it were, of managerial of strategies, really, to manage water properly, given its importance. So this is it. So when they appealed to the government, I thought, what can the government do right now?
Yeah.
Is it that perhaps when the crops fail, then
they
will
want to be
come
rescued,
and rescue,
sure.
help you with the package, maybe stuff like that. But right now, we don't have irrigation mechanisms
Well, I was going to say,
place.
I mean,
really
in case anybody doesn't know the Gambia, we've got a river running through it,
Yes.
and yet we don't tap into it enough to kind of irrigate the land that's either side of that river.
That's it, that sort of thing. Even though this year we were promised, wasn't it, above average, as they call it, rainfall.
Yes.
But of course, that doesn't mean that you're going to have this even distribution of it. Perhaps
because in other parts of the country, they've
Yeah.
had quite heavy
They've
rainfall.
got quite heavy rains, but not others.
Yeah.
I wonder whether the weather forecasters could see this coming, that with Central River region and area, maybe this is not the sort of thing that you can see. I do not know. There's science, but it will be interesting to see whether they knew it or they could know it, and how do we prepare the people? That is the thing about this forecasting, isn't it? Then people can prepare themselves well.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about any of those details, but this is just so hard.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, it reminds us still of our vulnerabilities. What do you do about it?
This is
So
it.
look at it, just
Yeah.
rain dependent.
Yeah.
We need to have another strategy
And what
given
do we do?
climate
What do we
change
do
and
next year based on this
what do
year's
we-
experience?
Exactly, what do we
Yeah.
do next year?
Mm-mm.
But it was just so slow
Yeah, quite.
in responding to things. It will probably take us, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years or anything, perhaps even more, to start
Yeah.
doing consequential things.
Yeah, sure.
Not just going through the emotions, you know, giving the impression that
Yeah,
you're
we're
doing
doing something, yeah,
something,
yeah.
you know what I mean? But consequential things,
Sure.
you know, really.
It's let's hope the rain comes at least for those farmers, because those of us who live in urban areas and have to drive our cars through rivers, we're not particularly keen on the rain. But thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. Story number 4, Gambia Tourist Board. For quite a while, even when Ahmad Ba was the minister, I remember him making a speech saying that he was going to try and encourage greater domestic tourism. Well, now they've actually launched a campaign to encourage us to do exactly that. Here's some of it. Have a look.
The delegation made their first stop at Tanje, where kayaking takes place. Kayaking is the use of a kayak, a type of canoe for moving over water. It is distinguished from canoeing by sitting the position of the paddler and the number of blades on the paddle. From kayaking at Tanje, the officials proceeded to jet skiing area, a popular recreational activity that offers a thrilling and enjoyable experience. Jet skiing involves riding across water on a vehicle with an engine on a machine which resembles a motorcycle.
Mr. Mboch, I could see you getting excited about both kayaking and jet skiing.
Yes.
So these are some of the things. They're not the complete package, of course. There are several, about 10 or 12 sorts of things, including trying to get people to go and visit some of the historical sites across the Gambia. And it made me wonder whether this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. When I was at school in Sierra Leone in the 60s, they would take us on school excursions to some of these historical sites. I don't know whether that sort of thing happens, and whether that would count as domestic tourism. But sometimes you go for a week into a particular area.
That's
But nonetheless, we've been talking about trying to change the offer here in the Gambia, not just getting the tourists and their dollars and their euros, but also the local dalasis, from people to say, you know, there are things to see in your own country, come and see them. What are the chances, Mr. Mboch?
That's it. And that kayaking, how much would it cost me?
I don't dare tell you. It's quite expensive.
Yeah, so you're not going to get what it's not going to happen.
I really don't dare mention the cost, but it's not just, for the average person, it's not cheap. And so that was one of the things that I said to the reporter who went, because both the reporter and the camera woman who went there, they both had a go at it. And so when they came back, I asked them the cost, and they told me both for the kayaking and for the jet skiing, it's even more. I think 3,500 a go per person, and that's some people's daily wage. So if you're trying to appeal to the local market, is that likely to be a good sell, Mr. Mboch?
At a sort of what I might call perhaps bourgeois, they've always done these things. You've seen them jet skiing and all of it, they do it all the time. But here, what they're talking about, really, to make it a kind of mass tourism.
Because that's the only way you're going to generate the kind of income that you think is being lost by, you know, foreign visitors not coming in.
But there's no appetite.
Yeah, quite.
Throughout, when we were younger, yes, of course, you can go for excursion, you know, anywhere, enjoy it once and that's it. When you come back, you're done with that.
Yeah,
so perhaps, I don't know, target the youth, the kids,
Sure.
create the appetite in that,
Yes.
come up with all kinds of deals with schools,
Well,
as it were, come and visit here, maybe create a kind of appetite for this sort of thing. Well, what's the incentive? Well, I just read it in books. Wasu, in the stone circles, I don't know, I'll go there once, and I didn't,
I've been there
you know,
once.
stuff
I've
like
been there
that.
once, yeah.
So I'm not sure whether this is a viable idea, it will take off.
Yeah.
Perhaps in the long term.
Sure.
I do not know how long. But right now you don't feel, people don't have the appetite. Nobody talks about it,
Yeah.
really.
I mean, when before this came in the office and when we got the letter to go and do the coverage, some of our colleagues started talking about some of the beautiful places they've been to rather inside the Gambia, including some of the eco lodges that almost the rest of the office had never heard of. And they were really extolling the virtues of this and kind of trying to encourage them. And nobody asked them to do it. It wasn't. And you're thinking, why are these places not advertised? That the whole office of about 30 people, only 2 people had either heard of or been to these particular places, and yet they were saying how wonderful they were, and they weren't that expensive. You know, they were able to go there, spend a weekend there, and had a fantastic time. I thought, okay, but you know, so that's kind of the thing that perhaps this is also part of what is part of the package that they're trying to sell.
Absolutely, but of course, how does it work? You know, these things, whether I'm going to go on holiday to Basse or to wherever, it depends on circumstances. How much money am I getting? Disposable income. I mean, maybe cost of living will come into it. For tourism to work, you need your people to be relatively well off.
Indeed. Indeed.
That is really what the issue is.
Because what you tour with is your disposable income.
Absolutely.
And if you can barely provide for the bag of rice, you're not going to put aside money to go on holiday, even in Basse or Farafenni.
Yes. You see, it's sort of like tourists who come from the West. You know, when you talk to them, they save up now that level.
That's
of
the traditional thing.
It's a traditional
you save up
thing.
for the holiday.
You save up for a holiday.
Yeah.
Do we have that culture? You know what I mean? Because of the extended family, every little that you save up, somebody will be in some trouble.
You can just imagine somebody saying, I booked a week at an eco lodge, and your auntie is saying, oh, and yet you didn't buy me a bag of rice when I needed it. So, you know, those are the competing pressures, really. Yeah.
So you need to create the enabling conditions, as it were, for this domestic tourism really to take hold. Sure. In the short term, I don't know, I can't see it.
In Britain, they refer to it as a staycation,
where
you stay in your own country.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's see whether staycations catch on. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Story number 5, which will also take us to the midpoint in terms of stories. Next door in Senegal, the newspapers decided to have a Blackout Tuesday. Very creatively, they had black front pages with 3 fists holding a pencil. And why? Because they were not happy with some government measures that were being brought in. Here's an indication of why they did it.
As part of Tuesday's media blackout, newspapers were displayed on newsstands with no content inside. The editions solely consisted of a black cover reading Journée sans presse, meaning a day without the press, and an image of free raised fist gripping a pencil. Not all papers participated in the protest. Private outlet Walfadjri, accused of being pro-government, called the blackout an ugly scar on the cheek of our beautiful democracy. From 2021 to 2024, Senegal slipped from 49th to 94th place on Media Watchdog Reporters Without Borders.
It's amazing how these things work. Walfadjri, which, as they mentioned there, people perceive to be kind of pro-Pastef and pro the current regime. They weren't protesting about scarring the democracy when similar things happened under Macky Sall. But now that the people that they support are in government, suddenly the reality hits them. And Sonko and Diomaye Faye both addressed this and said, you know, this is something serious that we need to attend to. But it shows you, as I think you once famously said, quoting someone, that when you're in opposition, all you have to move is your mouth. When you're in government, you have to deal with other stuff.
Absolutely, the hot seat when you're there. This is an interesting one. We've seen the Diomaye Sonko partnership. We've seen that they've been going on with institutional change. They've really been laying it into the institutions, as it were, to change them, what's been going on. Apparently with the media as well, they've not been paying certain taxes.
And that's what Sonko said. He said, and this is not sustainable. He said, we can't turn a blind eye to this forever. He said, at some point, taxes that you owe, you have to pay. because if it's called suddenly, your business could collapse, and that, then you'd blame us saying, oh, why have you called it in? So he was trying to kind of defend and say why, but nonetheless, he's called for dialogue, as you would imagine.
Freedom and regulation, that balance. How do you get that balance? It's just that with the media, because of the power that we have, really, and a government that touches us.
This is it.
we just go
and the reason why Al-Fajri came out with the statement they came out with, being supporters of the government, is because Reporters Without Borders were quite scathing about the kind of media landscape in Senegal, and this will just make it worse. And so they didn't want that to be the case, that the next time a report comes out, they've fallen even further down the ladder in terms of press freedom and so on, and lack of government interference, and that's why they came out quite strongly, kind of blasting all the other newspapers.
Absolutely. So with this one, perhaps Jomai and Sonko will realize sooner or later that yes, you need the reform, but be careful how you implement reform. I've heard political scientists sort of advise us saying that be careful how you introduce reform.
Well, this is it.
When you try to push in too much, too quickly, it might backfire.
And when you read some of the websites of some of the newspapers, what they objected to was that there'd been no consultation with them. It was sort of, they're trying to impose something on them, and it's a lesson for them. And as you said, be careful how you bring these things in, because the people who are affected, they're quite powerful, the media, and if you cheese them off, they can react, and they reacted as we saw. And that story went around the world. It was carried on all the kind of global media. It's not the kind of thing they want.
Yes, and I think this is really the problem with people who we normally refer to as conviction politicians, those driven by ideology. They feel that they are so right. So the idea of consulting
doesn't even come into
doesn't really come into it. So they tend to be even autocratic. You've seen them around. So, but Senegal is a democracy. So life will teach them to be careful. All these bumps that they're getting along the way,
part of the learning
that's all part of the learning curve. So they will tweak their system, to suit the country. That's the only way really you can make positive change, because every action you have a reaction, and so you have to carry people along as a politician. You have to carry people along. That's really how you change things.
Indeed. Let's hope they're watching, let's hope they're listening. And at this point we will take a break, and after the break we will have 5 more stories. So don't go away, join us after this break.
Welcome to the future of transportation in the Gambia. The Bertel Harding Highway, a 22-kilometer double carriageway, is set to revolutionize travel and connectivity in our beloved country. A 3-lane highway means more space for vehicles, smoother traffic flow, and reduced congestion. Each lane has a specific purpose. The leftmost lane for overtaking and faster vehicles, the middle lane for standard driving, and the rightmost lane for slower and turning vehicles.
Hello and welcome back. And if you're just joining us at this point, I won't upset you by telling you which 5 fantastic stories you've missed, but I will tell you that we've still got 5 fantastic stories still to go, so don't despair, okay? Now, story number 6, we have Gambia's fight against trafficking. It's a serious one, and people talk about this all the time. But what are we doing about it? Let's have a look and let's have a listen to some of our initiatives.
We do have Gambians that have been trafficked out of the Gambia. We do have other nationals that have been trafficked in the Gambia. And Gambia is also being used as a transit country like other nations. Despite all the challenges that we may face in respect of trafficking based on the current trends and patterns, we have an agency that is tirelessly and endlessly working to ensure that the current state of trafficking in the Gambia is not continuing to be alarming.
We hope it's not continuing to be alarming. But when I delved into this, and the trafficking in persons report that comes from the State Department of the United States, they still have us at tier 2. And I thought, what's involved in it? And so I did some digging. And, some of the stuff that, you get kind of bad marks for. People come here and say, I've got a contract for you to go and be a maid in Oman. And next thing you know, you've been trafficked when you thought you were going to get quite a good job. So it's quite complex. It's not an easy one to solve. But nonetheless, of course, as we heard there, we cannot give up. We have to keep fighting the fight.
Absolutely, because the very fact that we are on tier 2 tells you something.
Well, indeed.
Tier 1 means you've met the minimum standards. They've got the trafficking, trafficking victims. What? Protection Act, something like the TVL is minimum standards, that sort of thing. That's what they have. So we are not, we haven't met the minimum standards. This is what it means. But we've been making some significant strides.
That's right.
I think that really encapsulates
very much.
Yeah. It's a very, very difficult one.
Yeah, it's because, as I said, when you delve into it and you look at case studies, you hear, for example, about people who were sent to go and work with somebody who was supposedly a family member, and they said, oh, we'll pay this person and so on. And in fact, they end up in virtual slavery. They've been sent to another country thinking they were going to get an education, they were going to get pay, and all they do is work, and sometimes not even get the minimum. They get a place to sleep and something to eat, and that's it. Again, you've been trafficked. And so there are all these things. And so, how can a government agency really tackle something like that when, you and I know that as long as we've grown up, that's been part of the tradition. Oh, I'm going to send you to auntie this, uncle that, and they're going to kind of tweak versions of that. But essentially, it's the same thing. And now, we're getting in a stage where it's becoming kind of cross-border in a huge way, really. Yeah.
Especially when, you're right, when we send them to these Arab states.
Yeah, quite.
Virtual slavery. You have that bit, and so you also have the kids.
Yeah, quite.
For labor. Yeah. And this place is a transit as well. You have our Gambian women being taken to the Arab world, but you have all the kids as well on their way somewhere to another place. And they pass through here. So this is it. It's just the way we do things. You can have a child with an aunt. And then they tell you we are going, I don't know, we're going to Senegal, we're going to see wherever, or Bissau, and the like. But again, probably they're trafficking the kid. How do you stop these things? So
one of the reasons why I mentioned is because I was involved in effectively rescuing somebody who had been sent from Sierra Leone to the United Kingdom by the mother to a supposed good friend of the mother's. And my first day at the house, I was so shocked. Literally that day, I told the woman, I'm taking this child out of your hands. And she was horrified, but I did. Never returned her there again. And, that's one instance. There are many tens of thousands like that, they're not lucky enough to have that sort of intervention.
Absolutely. Yeah. And exactly, we've got that in Britain. You can rescue somebody.
Yeah, quite.
There's a system in place. Yeah. But over here, it's much more difficult.
It's very difficult.
Over here. So a lot of people will be exposed to these hazards.
Because
the structure sort of is not efficient.
It's not efficient enough. Exactly.
That's it, to really catch some of these
This is it. And the point the lady was making in the kind of extended version of that interview is that people tend to think that, it's a case of people being trafficked from the Gambia to somewhere else. She said, no, people are trafficked from somewhere else to the Gambia.
Exactly.
And so, that is all part of what we're having to tackle and having to deal with. And she said, because of that, it's not easy,
At all. Yeah. And she also said that for the past 18 months, they've had, 3
Yeah.
convictions.
Convictions
Then I
of
ask,
15 years each.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's good. I wonder how many arrests.
Well, this is it.
It's been. So how well are we doing
this is it,
in apprehending?
And as she said, and she kind of knew what the answer would be from people. 3, that's not a huge number. She said, but yes, it's a start, and it shows that we are trying, because it was 15 years for each of the 3 people, and one of them was also fined $50,000 as well, which, come on, whatever. But I guess the prison sentence is the stiffest of the sentence, and 15 years is quite a stiff sentence.
Absolutely, and let's hope this will be a deterrent.
Yeah, well,
that's really what we hope. Yeah. And then with this NATIP, with them to have the resources, the expertise, really to extend their work, that will matter, because they're really dealing with a frightfully difficult situation
difficult,
here.
It's complex.
Really,
and the people you're dealing with,
they're
probably experts in their dodginess already. Yeah.
Yes, and we have sort of this attitudes towards children. It's just unbelievable. You can't understand. It's as if kids are just economic indices. You use them for that. There's a certain conventional thinking about kids. So a lot of them will be vulnerable, will be subject to this sort of thing.
Yeah, sure.
And because of the people, what we are, the system will miss a lot.
Well, indeed.
Because it wouldn't be a shock on certain things you see. You should be shocked by it. Yeah. But with this, we've normalized it in so many different ways. That is why certain transgressions, they really go unnoticed, because we've normalized the wrong thing.
Well, I didn't want to go to stray too far off, but there was the orphanage that we and others helped expose, where they had huge numbers of children that were being terribly abused, and within the community and in plain sight. And nothing was done about them. They were kept in disgusting conditions. Nothing until ourselves and another journalist who tipped us off ended up exposing it, leading to the closure of that particular place. People who could have been arrested, should have been arrested, fled, or didn't come into the country where, for fear of arrest. But it was a one-off, and it's the kind of thing that happens. As you said, we've normalized that it was happening in the community, and it took one person to go and tell this journalist, who then told us, but many others don't even get that opportunity.
Absolutely, there's a certain conventional sort of way of thinking that is not child-friendly at all.
No.
So this is really what we're facing here.
Sure.
And when the state is not strong enough to protect them, what can you say in the end? God have mercy on them.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Story number 7, a very different story. A former jungler, a former member of ex-President Jammeh's junglers, has been arrested. How and why? I won't spoil it for you. Have a look, have a listen.
On Friday, the 9th of August 2024, the Gambia Armed Forces had information about the presence in this country of ex-Brigadier General Bora Koli, who was a former senior officer of the Gambia Armed Forces and a member of the junglers, who had left this country in January 2017 after the departure of former President Yahya Jammeh. And acting on this information, the Gambia Armed Forces intelligence operatives mounted a surveillance around his residence within the Greater Banjul area. However, before midnight on Friday, ex-General Bora Koli surrendered himself at the military police post in Yundum Barracks. And since his surrender, an arrest was effected on him and was placed under the custody of the military police.
Before we deep dive into this one, those watching who don't know the Gambia or didn't follow the TRRC are thinking, what's a jungler? I think Al Jazeera nailed it by calling them ex-President Jammeh's hit squad. And they did all sorts of allegedly dirty deeds on his behalf, and this ex-Brigadier General was one of those. And Mr. Mboj, all sorts of questions have arisen since his surrender and arrest, the formal procedure of him being arrested, including how long had he been in the country before he decided to turn himself in. But nonetheless, one of the ones who had been adversely mentioned at the TRRC, who is now in custody.
Absolutely. He left with Jammeh, didn't he? He went
did.
to Equatorial Guinea.
This is it.
So this is it. I don't know, he got tired. I don't know what happened.
Homesick, who knows?
Homesick, whatever
Yeah,
happened.
yeah.
So anyway, yes. So the investigative panel that they've formed,
Yes, right.
hopefully they'll answer say questions. When did they come? For how long?
Yes.
And who even helped him? I didn't know that sort of thing.
This is it.
That's it. So what next? I think that will be a more
What is
interesting.
the big question.
Is the big question.
Because the tribunal that has been kind of gazetted has not yet been constituted, and so you can't bring people to a non-constituted tribunal, and we don't know when they will be constituted and how long that process will take, and until then, how long. But the fact he's come back into the country might tell you that he's probably not about to flee, so he might be here and he might be ready to face justice.
That's it, and perhaps depending on what happened to him, would others follow suit?
This is it.
You just
Because
never
they'll all
know.
be watching.
They'll all be watching.
Yeah.
But you know, read Brody.
Yeah.
Brody thinks that our courts have jurisdiction.
Well, yeah, that's
You
it.
know,
They don't have to wait for
They don't have to wait for the tribunal.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting.
Sure.
I don't know what they're going to do. This is a tricky one.
It's a tricky one because do they want to set a precedent for all of those who are adversely mentioned by trying them, or do they want to wait for the tribunal, which is having, will have funds thrown at it and resources thrown at it, or as you said, as Reed Brody says, our laws already allow us to prosecute if we wanted to. Nothing to stop us.
That's it. But if you're going to wait for that hybrid tribunal, then what happens to him? Do you let him go?
This is the point I was making, that the fact that he's come back into the country, they might release him on bail because they'll say, okay, well, he's already back in the country. We didn't drag him here. He came of his own volition. But it does raise all sorts of questions. So the investigative panel, not only will they be looking at that, I guess they'll be looking at all the other kind of spillovers from his actually being in the country.
That's it. And we were told there by the PRO that his rights will be respected.
Yep.
Then how long does he have? Would you have to be in custody before you have to release him or charge him? So would all of that be recognized as well? So it's going to be a test for our authorities to see how they deal with this, how they manage it. I'm sure sooner or later the courts will come into it, because if they're going to want to hold him, is it beyond 72 hours? Perhaps his lawyers will start going asking, habeas corpus, perhaps. Appeal for
and people were saying, oh, just hold him for as long, but no, because the law still says innocent until proven guilty. So just because nasty things have been said about you doesn't mean that those nasty things have been proven in a court of law.
That's it. So it will be a test case for us. I think none of us can really tell, what's going to happen. So we'll see how they handle this one and how that might influence others to come and the like.
Yeah, let's keep our eyes on that one. Thank you for that, Mr. Bode. Story number 8, we go to the United Nations Security Council. They have a rotating presidency, and this time, August, the whole of August, the presidency resides in the hands of Sierra Leone. What are they doing with it? I won't spoil it. Let Madabio tell you.
The current lack of representation in the permanent category does not reflect the current global landscape. And it is fundamental to consider the structural changes for its rectification. Additionally, it is significant to evaluate the Security Council's performance and legitimacy to ensure its effectiveness in addressing global challenges.
We cannot accept that the world's preeminent peace and security body lacks a permanent voice for a continent of well over 1 billion people, a young and rapidly growing population, making up 28% of the membership of the United Nations.
And there we heard President Madabio of Sierra Leone, followed by the UN Secretary General Guterres. Mr. Mbowe, this one's been around for quite a while, you and I and folks of my age and older, and we're saying that the Security Council, which has the permanent members' veto, really is not sustainable or tenable. But yet, to price open that is the most difficult thing. And Sierra Leone has decided to bring it to the fore. And Mada Bio didn't mince his words. He said it's unacceptable for this to go on.
Absolutely. I do hear that argument that the world has changed so much that this thing is not sustainable and all of that. But I'm not sure whether having a seat, a permanent seat, and veto power really depends on the numbers.
No.
It depends on your power.
When
when the UN Secretary General was saying that in Africa, South, we've got all these numbers and all the rest of it, oh please.
It's on your power.
It doesn't depend on that.
Yeah.
And when you take the big five, they're really still in power.
Yeah,
they dominate the world. Nothing has changed there. The Arabs, there's nothing that has emerged from there powerful enough.
Right.
So the US, China, Russia, UK, France, they are still really the power.
They are the power, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because when we were discussing this, I said the Arab states with all their wealth,
nothing.
They've not been pushing for this.
No.
And yet they've been affected by some of the decisions that have been taken, the vetoes that have been taken. They've not been pushing for this. We don't have the kind of financial clout that they have. And yet, we're pushing for it, and we're saying that, it's about time, it's unfair. Look, as you rightly said, before Russia had it, it was the Soviet Union that had it. When the Soviet Union dissolved, it then fell into the lap of Russia. They say, okay, let's give it to Russia, what used to belong to the Soviet Union. And I said on another occasion, Ukraine are probably regretting that particular decision. Because if those who don't know, if you bring something to the table, a resolution that they don't like, they can kill it, any of them. Any of them vetoes it, it's dead in the water. You might as well not have wasted your time and your breath to even bring it to the floor. And that's one of the many reasons why many people have said this thing is no longer fit for purpose, the UN and the UN Security Council. Well, particularly the Security Council, one might say.
Absolutely, but not fit for purpose. Really, what was its purpose? Come on, let's go back.
Maintain peace in the world and all that kind of stuff.
Maintain peace in the world and all that thing. And for it to work, the Security Council had to have that arrangement to get all these people on board.
This is it.
This was really how they got them really on board. But they are still in power when it comes to economically, militarily. That's the backup. That's always the decider. Really, we are seeing.
That's why China's there.
That's why China is there. So where do you see the drive for positive change coming from? We can gang up the General Assembly. We can gang up on them, but we've been ganging up for such a long time. What do you do? What leverage do you have over them? So I really cannot see much of this.
Because
maybe
the point is we've not made the case strongly enough, I guess.
Maybe you might get your permanent membership, but veto power, it's not leaving, and you wouldn't have the veto power.
This is it.
Yes, you will get your permanent membership if you want.
They want both.
You might get that, but not the veto power, which is really
in the hands of people who are not going to let go of that tight grip on it.
How would it get through? Anything table a motion, they will veto.
This is it. It's like, what's it say, turkeys voting for Christmas. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Thank you.
So yes, the idealism, keep the pressure on, but realistically, I can't see that sort of thing happening soon. No condition is permanent. Perhaps in the much longer term, after we've become more powerful economically, militarily. The UN has been evolving in time, hasn't it? Since its creation in 1945, isn't it?
That's right.
So this is it. I'm not sure whether the time is ripe for them to take this seriously.
Quite. Thank you for that. We shall find out what happens at the end of Sierra Leone's 1 month. Thank you for that. Story number 9, penultimate story, Mpox. Another global emergency is just around the corner. What's this one all about? Have a look and be scared.
The detection and rapid spread of a new clade of Mpox in eastern DRC, its detection in neighboring countries that had not previously reported Mpox, and the potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying. In addition to other outbreaks, of other clades of Mpox in other parts of Africa, it's clear that a coordinated international response is essential to stop these outbreaks and save lives.
Coordinated response needed, and headline says another global emergency looms, Mr. Mboj. And interestingly, over a year ago, somebody sent me a video over a year ago saying that I bet you in about a year or two's time they'll be telling you that monkeypox, which is what they're now calling Mpox, is on the rise and we need to tackle it on a global. And the person sent it to me in a kind of pointed way, said, you see, I told you that they would do this, and they've done it. But yes, it's escaped beyond Africa's borders, and now it's reached Europe, and suddenly everybody's sitting up and saying this is a global emergency, and it's the most virulent type that has escaped, as it were, been detected in Sweden.
Yes, and so many unknowns. They really do not quite understand it. And it was really the Africa Centers for Disease Control that really first declared it public emergency in Africa. And then a day later or 2 days later,
2 days later,
the WHO said so. And this is extraordinary. Yes, it's going to be they've declared it a global public health emergency, granted. But remember in 2022, when the outbreak in 2022 in Europe, they contained it because of their systems. So the effect really would be different. It would be massively unfair. Europe might be able to contain it. The problem is with us this time. Really, that's really what the issue is. There are vaccines. But to have access to them.
Well, this is it. But that's been the latest kind of iteration of the debate. How do we get access to the vaccines?
How do we get access to the vaccines? And DRC, it's just ravaging DRC.
Ebola,
when you look at, if you look
AIDS,
at everything over there. So this is it. And you know, that is as usual, isn't it? We got it, the COVID-19 experience. Are we going to get the help really to deal with this? Because as we've said, internally, there isn't the resilience, the resources, the infrastructure to deal with this. So we rely on help.
It takes us to our last story. And International Organization for Migration has recently done something quite unusual. They've awarded grants to people. Who are these people? Have a look, have a listen.
We support the communities to address the issues of irregular migration, or what's commonly known as the back way. The intervention is very much in line with the government's Green Recovery focused National Development Plan. It is also in line with the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework.
Cinem Arena is a mobile cinema providing a set of outdoor events in rural and urban areas using films, documentaries, and testimonies. The aim is to ensure outreach and to carry out educational and information campaigns in the most remote and disadvantaged areas about the risks of irregular migration while presenting alternatives.
Presenting alternatives to irregular migration, the thing we keep hearing about all the time. And so what they've done is they've awarded grants to entrepreneurs. It's not just a case of, come and watch this movie, come and watch this documentary. Come up with solutions, come up with something, and we'll see if we can give you some funding towards that. And that's exactly what's happened on this case, and so quite a good one.
Yes, apparently over 400 applied. In the end, they could only give it to these 25. Yes, and fantastic for these 25 to have these opportunities and the like. But for the general bigger purpose of having these activities having any effect whatsoever on the numbers going is going to be minimal. Would it be consequential? Or perhaps they're thinking that this is just one pillar, one activity amongst a whole cluster, amongst many activities.
And I think they do have many activities.
Okay, fine.
This is one of them,
But we are dealing with here something rather curious. Covered a story where in Tangier
it defies logic.
It defies logic. That sort of thing. And if you think that it's money, these people are just so poor that they want to leave. I think it's sort of deeper than that. There is no sense of seeing any prospects. It's much deeper than that. The kind of malaise, the soul. So this is it. They're having to deal with the difficult problem here. I don't think it will make any difference. It will dent that appetite, that will, people wanting to go.
It's deep, particularly in the Gambia. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And just to say thanks again to Mr. Mboj for his interjections, and to Lamin D. Sonko for his interpretations and translations, and of course to you, the viewer, for watching. Until we come your way again next week. Bye-bye.